Buckle up, because this election season is just getting wilder by the minute, and that's why we're always ready to get the pulse on people, power, and politics. Thanks so much for staying up late with us. I'm Raj. It is another busy night of news. A Detroit woman who went to law school with J.D. Vance hitting hard, saying he's an example of the collapse of decency in politics. You know, and I hopped on my Facebook and X page and asked for your questions about what a Harris presidency would look like. And in just a few minutes, the vice chair of the Democratic Party in Michigan is in studio to answer some of those questions. And yes, tomorrow night, we are going to do the same with a Trump advocate as well. But we begin tonight with major developing news. The official leading the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 is stepping down. This is the Trump campaign further distances itself from that plan. Now, that plan would have brought sweeping change to the federal government, including overhauling rules to ensure government workers are more loyal to the president. Trump's campaign said this should serve as notice to anyone misrepresenting their influence with President Trump and his campaign. They go on to say it will not end well for you. Now, while the Project 2025 future looks dim because of this, the website is still active, and the Heritage Foundation promises to continue the work that they do. And now look at these new pictures from inside the Atlanta venue Vice President Harris campaigned tonight. You just saw it a minute ago. The state is one that she and President Biden won back in 2020, despite the fact Republicans control the state there. And if that's not enough, people stood in long lines this morning, even though doors didn't open until 3:30 this afternoon, to make sure they got a spot. And so, yes, the buzz is on for Kamala Harris right now. Turning to the other side of the ticket and the Harris VPstakes. Her choice could come within just days, and we've heard names like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly. And what about this? Gary Peters, our own senator, floated as a possibility by some. Now, there's a big difference here, and I want you to really listen to this. Peters is not being formally vetted. He's not. The others are. So what's happening here? Well, here's the deal. Labor groups are lobbying for Peters to be considered. The Harris camp plans to reveal its final decision by August 7th, which the clock is ticking is next Wednesday. You know, one of the names you've heard from the start said thanks, but no thanks. We're talking about North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. He just said yesterday he's opting out and doesn't want to be considered for this role at all. Cooper was seen as an attractive option, winning a state Trump carried in both 2016 and also in 2020. But since there is a Michigan connection to the VPstakes now, we want to hear from you. We always say people over politics, people over pundits, and now we're getting a pulse on what you think of a Peters vice presidential candidate.
If he could get in, if he can make a better difference, hey, he can go for it.
I think he would do absolutely nothing for the Democratic Party, so I think he should go on with Kamala Harris so that Donald Trump can take Michigan and make America great again.
My major concerns is that the inflation be lowered. It's really ridiculous out here. I'm literally making life decisions at the pump. Like, if I spend $20 on gas, I'll probably have another $40 to get through the week for lunch or whatever the case may be. And I just went in Jimmy John's and spent $10 on one sandwich, and that's insane to me.
All right, we also asked the question, I was actually getting my phone for good reason because I want to talk to you about this. Would Peters be a good vice presidential candidate? So far, an overwhelming majority of you say he wouldn't be a good choice. You can vote now by scanning the QR code right there on your screen. As you see right now, only 18% of the people say he would be a good choice. 79% say not so much. I'll get to my phone and why it just dropped on the floor in a second here. But Peters might be a familiar name to you, having been in Metro Detroit and Michigan politics for more than 30 years. But just in case you need a refresher on his career, it's time to take a deep dive. The 65-year-old Peters served in the U.S. Navy Reserve, rising to the rank of lieutenant commander. He was also elected to the Rochester Hills City Council. That was back in 1991. Then to the state Senate in 1994. He served 2 terms there. He lost a bid to Attorney General Mike Cox back in 2002, but that wasn't it. He was elected to the U.S. House in 2008, where he served until he was elected to the Senate. Now, that happened in 2014 when he took over Carl Levin's seat. Now, we'll have to see if he keeps moving up on this political food chain. It was a busy day for the senator today as the committee he chairs, the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, pressed the acting Secret Service director about this, the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. Senators called the attack a failure by the agency, something the acting director didn't push back on.
I've heard your calls for accountability, and I take them very seriously. I cannot understand why there was not better coverage, or at least somebody looking at that roofline.
There is no question that this was a monumental failure by the Secret Service. They had one job, and they failed.
He was identified as being suspicious by local law enforcement.
And nothing happened.
Well, I know that local law enforcement was attempting to locate him.
That last soundbite you heard was related to the fact a local SWAT team pegged the shooter as being suspicious roughly 2 hours before these terrible scenes happened. The shots were fired, as you know. Trump was shot in the ear, and a supporter attending that Pennsylvania rally was killed protecting his own family. The Secret Service shot and killed the 20-year-old gunman. Trump is expected, by the way, to sit down with the FBI agents on Thursday for an interview, something that's routine in this type of an investigation. Well, turning to Trump's side of the ticket, J.D. Vance went from never Trumper to Trump defender to vice presidential candidate. And now we're hearing from someone who actually knew him and is bringing up some controversial comments from his past. We're talking about Sophia Nelson. Went to Yale with Vance and was actually friends with him. But now she calls him, quote, a political chameleon who abandoned decency to advance his own career. Nelson is transgender and says their friendship changed in 2021.
When he started speaking very cruelly about trans and LGBTQ people, and I confronted him about it, and we had a pretty bitter exchange, and that was the end. Because I can, again, have friendship across those political differences, but when you start name-calling and then questioning my right to exist and access health care, that's where I have to draw the line.
Why sit down now and share this?
This was a very difficult decision for me. One, because despite all this, I feel some sense of loyalty to him as a friend still. And I do care about him and his wife and their family. However, I think this is a crucial election, and I felt that the American people deserve to know the depth of his flip-flops.
By the way, you can watch our full interview with Nelson on fox2detroit.com. Meantime, we heard from a spokesperson for Senator Vance who says this: it's unfortunate this individual chose to leak decade-old private conversations between friends to the New York Times. Senator Vance values his friendships with individuals across the political spectrum. He goes on to say he has been open about the fact that some of his views from a decade ago began to change after becoming a dad and starting a family. And he has thoroughly explained why he changed his mind on President Donald Trump. Another key question since the shakeup in the presidential race last week: when will these two finally square off on the debate stage? Former President Trump hasn't 100% committed to it, saying while he'll probably debate Harris, he can, quote, also make a case for not doing it. That prompted the Harris campaign to fire back, saying Trump is scared. But it got me wondering, who do you think would win a debate between Trump and Harris? And now why my floor director was handing me the cell phone. If you see me hitting the streets with my cell phone, come up, tell me what you think about stuff. We had a chance to talk with people just like you, and here's what they told me.
Antonio, on the Pulse tonight, presidential debates, first of all, do you think they're helpful?
I think they're very helpful. It's great to get each candidate's perspective and see where they're coming from before any other steps are taken.
James, on the Pulse right now, watching a presidential debate between Trump and Harris, would that be helpful for you?
Yes.
Why?
Because I would like to see them debate each other live on air and see what the answers to the questions are.
All right. Would it be helpful to watch the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump?
Yes.
What would you want to hear them talk about, both of those candidates?
The economy, getting them more money, getting the money down from everything being so expensive.
All right, Dahlia here in Birmingham, presidential debates. Would you watch it, and would it help you make a decision?
No.
Why?
Because my mind is already set.
If you had to bet on who would kind of win the debate, what would you say?
I don't know. I'd probably say Trump.
Kamala!
I heard someone in the background say something else. Kamala Harris would win?
Yes.
Why?
I don't know how to answer that.
Because
she's a strong, intelligent woman.
If you see me with my cell phone, please come up and say hi. I'd love to talk to you. I'm going to get rid of the cell phone. We won't drop it for a second time today. Thanks, Bobby. Trump and Biden had a second debate scheduled, by the way, for September. You may remember that. But since Biden dropped out, Trump has said that debate should move to another network, criticizing ABC News with a phrase he often uses, fake news. This comes as the former president's campaign releases a new ad attacking Vice President Harris for what they say is her failure to address the crisis at the southern border. It's an issue Trump repeatedly attacked President Biden on, saying his administration's policies have made the issue worse. Here's a clip from that new ad.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
This is America's border czar, and she's failed us. Under Harris, over 10 million illegally here. 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl. Brutal migrant crimes. And ISIS now here.
Do you have any plan?
I'm sure the Trump camp would love it if we aired the whole ad, but that's not the purpose of doing that. We're on a political show. Just to give you an idea as to some of the claims in that ad, we did a little deep dive into this, but just a little WTF, as in with the facts here. She's not the border czar. She never has been. Look at any reporting in the past. And the White House never called her that. The Department of Homeland Security always has been in charge of the border. Vice President Harris was tasked with tackling immigration, but it was from this angle, addressing the reason behind the influx of migrants from Central America to the U.S. She was not tasked with actually enforcing the border. Now, if you want to see our full fact check, you can go back to our show from July 23rd and watch any edition of The Pulse on fox2detroit.com. And you better believe it, we are checking the Harris camp as well, each and every claim. We're watching both candidates closely, and we are ready for a WTF, as in with the facts. Now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Less than 100 days until Election Day, and while the Harris campaign hit the ground running, it's still very much in its infancy. Only like 8 days or 9 days. Joining us now to talk about the campaign and answer your questions, Michigan Democratic Party Vice Chair Jason Morgan in the hot seat tonight. Thanks for staying up with us tonight and being with us here on The Pulse.
Great to be with you, Roop.
So let's talk about this. First of all, misconceptions about Vice President Kamala Harris. One of the things that I know the Trump campaign will be going after her for is, we saw with that ad, is the border. How do you think the Harris campaign can come out swinging back?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The border is something that's used as a political football, has been for many years, and frankly, it's a distraction from the real issues that are impacting everyday people. Our basic reproductive health freedoms, our basic protection of democracy, working class voters having the ability to get by. And if folks want to talk about the issue, I've actually been stationed at the southern border at a border patrol station through my work as a Coast Guard auxiliarist, and I will tell you, it is not a political place. There's not a single person at that border thinking about the politics of what they're dealing with. We have folks coming into this country seeking asylum, and folks coming in and who should not be allowed in.
Well,
those folks there, their job is to determine who should be allowed in and who needs to be sent home. That's what's happening at the border. It should not be a political football. It happens every election, and it just is inhumane to me.
But I do want to push back a little bit on that, because we know that while it's not necessarily a political issue for those who are coming in, oftentimes when you have the increase in fentanyl, it comes through the borders and all kinds of other issues, people want to know that the borders are secure. Do you think this vice president could have done better? Do you think Harris could have done better in finding the root cause of the border issues and been a stronger leader when it comes to the border?
I think she did a phenomenal job. I think her job was to find the root causes, and that's exactly what she did. If you look at the data and you look at the numbers, the work that she did has made a positive impact in reducing the inflow of folks coming into this country and improving conditions where folks are at. I think everybody in America wants people to be safe and have the ability to get by where their home country is, and that's what her job was to do, and she did it successfully. So what we're dealing with now is far less severe because of the actions of Vice President Harris.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the other issues. You talked about it. You're saying people's pocketbooks matter. I know we have some questions from some Fox 2 viewers. I want to get to our first one right now. This one coming from GrizzUO, asking a little bit about what she will do, this particular candidate, Harris, to address the country's debt. And interest on that debt. It's an issue that just in the headlines today, we talked about the debt hitting $35 trillion. That's a crazy amount of money. What do you think this vice president, fiscally speaking, can do to help this country move forward?
Well, so I should be clear. I certainly do not speak for the vice president in any capacity, sure. But what I can say is this. I think we do certainly have to address our national debt looking ahead to the future. As a young person, I want to make sure that the programs and services that have been protecting my grandparents and my parents are there for me and for my potential kids one day. This is something that's really important. We do have to address that, but right now we're getting through the COVID recession, we're getting through the Trump tax cuts, and a lot of different decisions that were made in the past that have really contributed to that debt. So we need to make sure that we're stabilized and we have America on the right footing so that we can then work to address that debt long term and make sure that we are protecting our nation's finances for my kids and future generations.
But do you think that the Biden-Harris administration put us in a bad place as well? I know you mentioned the tax cuts from Trump, but also talking about how much this administration has spent. Trillions of dollars on infrastructure package and this package and the COVID relief packages. And a lot of people say that's the reason we ended up in this inflationary period. Do you think the Biden the Harris campaign can do better than the Biden camp in fixing this problem?
Well, I think there's a difference when you talk about debt. There's debt that doesn't contribute to our nation's economy and to our GDP and our economic growth. That's the Trump tax cuts. There's also debt that can invest in our nation. So the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure building throughout our nation, that is the type of spending that creates a foundation for our nation's future. That is necessary spending that's investing directly in the American people, our roads, our bridges, our water, our sewer, our basic infrastructure that we hadn't invested in for a lot of years. That is spending that is going to return dividends long into the future. And that's the important nuance people need to understand is there's debt, and there's debt that's investing in our nation's future. And there's a big difference between those two things.
It'll be interesting to see how we move forward with the spending on infrastructure. In the meantime, Curtis has a question as well here on the Pulse. And Curtis is asking, what are the most significant challenges we'll face and what measures will we implement to address them? In other words, we're in this unprecedented, strange time in history where we have so much uncertainty. And there are those out there who may be moderate or on the fence who say, is Kamala Harris too left? Is she too left of center? And what are some of those measures that she'll implement to make sure that we're in a better financial footing, in a better place?
I think that's a phenomenal question. I think that the way I see it, there are two futures for our country. I think there's one path under Vice President Harris that protects our basic freedoms, that pushes back against the darkness of discrimination and protects our democracy. There's a path that invests in working families and makes sure that we're taking care of those who need a leg up. And we're lowering costs for American families. I think that's one clear path that looks a lot brighter going ahead into the future.
Do you think she's too far left of center? Do you think she needs to kind of centralize a little bit with some of her policies, some of the things that she's talked about?
I don't think the issues that are before us at this point are left or right issues. I mean, basic foundations of our Constitution, our freedoms, and our democracy, that isn't a liberal or conservative idea. That's an American idea. And I think what you see with a potential future President Trump again would be a path toward darkness. It's more tax cuts for the wealthy. It's a rollback of our basic fundamental rights and freedoms empowered by a Supreme Court that he appointed. And it's a whole lot of things that look like we're going backward, when I would rather see this other path that looks at prosperity and growth and investing in the future of our nation.
Well, everyone wants that regardless of how they think they're going to get there. And I want to thank you, Jason Morgan, the vice chair of the Democratic Party here in Michigan, a representative here, for joining us. And if you're wondering, on the other side of the break, tomorrow, I want to tell you, we're going to have someone who's sitting in this seat talking about what the Trump administration can do to help America move forward. That's coming up tomorrow night on The Pulse. We are making sure to give both sides equal time. There's a lot of fake stuff on your social media accounts pretending to have the real story. Really? You knew that. Including deepfakes. David Derajotis, a cyber risk expert with Flow Specialty, tells The Pulse how you can tell what's real and what's bogus. Talk a little bit about the deepfakes. We saw from the assassination attempt against former President Trump, fake imagery of the Secret Service people smiling as they were holding him. This is all on social media. There's a lot of unverified stuff on social media, isn't there?
There is. When you look at how easy it is to create this type of content, and I can tell you because I do it, from a hobby standpoint, from looking at clients and working with different clients all over the world, AI technology has continued to progress at a rate much faster than any other area of technology. So it is getting harder when you look at the images, when you look at the audio, when you look at the video, it's becoming much tougher to tell what's real and what's not.
I have so many friends of mine and family members who send me things they see on social media and ask me, because they know I'm a news guy, hey, is this real? Did this really happen?
That's where we're at in this world, and we need to take pause and understand that before we share something, we got to verify it, right?
We do. You know, what was it, the famous quote back during the Cold War era, trust but verify. Now, unfortunately, we need to verify before we trust. So I think it's very important to take a look at what is the profile that posted it. Can I find this video or this image on other postings, on other social media sites? Is it something that can be verified? Is it something that's legitimate? Or is it coming from this brand new profile, this scam account that was just created the other day and is looking to spread this information?
How do we know when a news source on social media is actually a news source?
I think it requires a little bit of investigation on our part. I think it's great to have multiple outlets and multiple sources as long as it can be verified and as long as it's true and legitimate. We have to do a little bit of critical thinking and have discernment when looking at the different stories, the different blogs, the different content that's being shared. So again, I think it's so critical that we just slow down for a moment and pull back from this incredible consumption